For the while statement, when n is equal to 0, right? You can almost treat the while statement as if it were the English-like statements. All these things are just like English-like statements. It means while is n is greater than 0, so display the value of n and uh, then reduce the value of n by 1. When you get it as 0, the exist a while statement and the word last of. Move formally. Here is the flow of the execution for a while statement. Evaluate the condition yielding true or false. If the condition is false, exist a while statement and continue the what you call it as the execution at the next statement. If the condition is true, execute the body and go back to the step number 1. So look, go back to the previous slide here. So unlike your C and C++, we are not enclosing what you call it as sequence of instruction for a while statement in a pair of curly braces. Instead, you can recognize here the after while statement we have two instructions here. So in C and C++, if you not enclose these two instruction in a pair of brackets or in a braces, then it is understood that why after while statement only print statement will be get executed. But in Python, the sequence or the code blocks will be identified by their indentation. By their indentation, look at the indentation here, right? While n is greater than 0, that is colon, and then followed by one indentation, and the second indentation I have. That means after while statement, so you're supposed to execute these two instructions, that is a print n and n is equal to n minus 1, right? You're not supposed to enclose within a pair of brackets. Only thing that you can understand uh, the, the sequence of the block of code is that it is just only through the indentation, right? uh, the proper indentation is needed in case of the while statement. So this type of flow is called as a loop because the third step loops back around to the top. That is, every time when you um, decrement the value of n, it will loop back to the first instruction. Each time you execute the body of the loop, we will call it an iteration. That is for if you execute all the three instructions one time, we call it as one iteration. For the above loop, we would say it had 5 iterations, right? Because all the 3 instructions are executed 3 times, which means that the body of the loop is executed 5 times. The body of the loop should change the value of one or more variables so that eventually the condition becomes false and the loop terminates, right? You can change the value of the value or more than one value. You can also change it so that the condition becomes eventually false. If it doesn't becomes false, then your entire execution will enter or entire program enters into an infinite loop. The call, the variable that changes each time the loop executes and controls when the loop finishes the iteration variables. If there is no iteration variable, the loop will repeat it forward, resulting in an infinite loop. That you already know that if the condition is always true, then your loop will enter certain infinite loop there. So you're supposed to terminate it abruptly, right? So that is the only way you can have it. So let us talk about what do you mean by infinite loops. In infinite loop, because there is no iteration variable telling you how many times to execute the loop, right? So in the previous case, what we have done is that uh, we have made the while loop to execute it 5 iterations or for 5 times. But if you have not specified the number of times the each instruction can execute, so your program will enter into an infinite loop. In the case of previous example, we can prove that the loop terminates because you know that the value of n is finite. You can see that the value of n gets smaller each time through the loop, so eventually we have to get it to 0, right? For each iteration, what you are doing is that we are decrementing the value of 0. After 5 iterations, it becomes 0. So when it becomes 0, the condition fails or it becomes false. So it will your execution control will come back to the things. Other times the loop is obviously infinite because it has no iteration variables at all, right? There are some conditions where um, you have not specified the false value at all, right? So in that case, it enters into an infinite loop. And to break an infinite loop, there is one method called as a break, right? So that is like to infinitely, you can break an infinite loop by using a method called as a break. Apart from specifying the false value, you can also specify a break statement. Sometimes you don't know it is time to end a loop until you get halfway through the body, right? And in that case, you can write an infinite loop on purpose and then use the break statement to jump out of the loop. There are a few cases where you have purposefully written a statement, infinite loop, right? But uh, you have included some statement into your code sequence in such a way that you are breaking the infinite loop manually, right? This loop is obviously an infinite loop because the logical expression on the while loop, right? You look at the this one, right? When n is equal to 10 and while true, print 10 and n is equal to n minus 1. This is always true, right? This is always true. Then that's why these subsequent two instructions will execute infinitely, right? It will execute infinitely. So to terminate this one method is that either you just use or just change it, or you're supposed to pass an argument in such a way that this must become a false value. Other, you have to use other method called as the break. So let us if you make a mistake and run this code, you will learn quickly that this program will run forward or until the battery runs out, right? You're running the program infinitely, or in some cases, what you do is that you're running it until your battery runs out. Because the logical expression at the end of the loop is always true by virtue of the fact that the expression is the constant value true, right? Your logical expression is always true, right? This is always true because there is no condition evaluation here. So this is always true. That's why it runs into an infinite loop. So to break this infinite loop, you're supposed to use some methods, right? So can anyone tell me what is wrong with this program? Can anyone tell me what is wrong with this program? Is there anything wrong with this program? Yes, anyone? Can you hear me? Hello? Is there anything wrong with this program? Yes? Is there anything wrong with this program? This is an infinite loop, right? Because there is no logical expression that is going to change the value of n anywhere, right? So it enters into an infinite loop, printing leather and rinse every time, right? It prints the value called as leather and rinse every time that you execute it, right? So you are not going to print the value called as a dry off anywhere, right? So that is what the problem here. So here is one more loop, right? N is equal to 0 and n is greater than 0. N is greater than 0. Yeah, what is the outcome of this program? What is the outcome of this program? Yes? What's the outcome? Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
What's the output of this program? Okay.
Value down ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳೋ ಮಂಟಲ್ ಮಾರ್ಕೆಟ್ ಪುಟ್ಟದ ಒಳಗೆ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
So the outcome of the output of this program is it is going to print only a value called as the dry off, because this condition is not true, that is when is greater than 0. This condition is not true, that's fine, it will print only a value called as the dry off, right? So that is what the output of this program. So to break out of an infinite loop, what we are doing is that while this is a dysfunctional infinite loop, we can still use this pattern to build useful loops as long as we carefully add code to the body of the loop to explicitly exit the loop using break when you have reached the exit condition, right? Even though you cannot break the infinite loop by using the conditional expressions, what you can do is that you can break the infinite loop using a keyword called as the break. For example, suppose you want to take input from the user until they type it type it done, right? So you're in some cases you have to wait for the input from an user. When the user inputs something, you will break the infinite loop, then you accept the input. That is one way of things. So this is how you can do the things. Here is an example of uh, breaking the infinite loop. The break statement ends the current loop and jumps to the statement immediately following the it is like a loop test that can happen anywhere in the body of the loop. What you are doing is that we are waiting for those things, right? So while true, this is anyhow takes the while loop to infinite loop. This is going to take the entire instruction into an infinite loop. But there are some cases where you can break it explicitly by using the break statement, right? So what I am doing is that we are putting, or we are inputting something from the user, right? Input, it's a function, right? So what I'm doing is that I'm asking the user to input the things, right? What he'll do is that he will enter something called as a hello there. So what he'll do is that I'm just checking whether the inputted value is equal to done or not. If it is not equal to done, what I'm doing is that I'm just printing the the value that has inputted by the user. So second, it loops it again. So in the second case, what you will do is that you will enter something called as a finished. So whether again we'll check it whether it is equal to done or not. If it is not equal to done, so I'll print the value of the value that has been entered, that is finished. Again, it will loop it back, right? It is true again. So we'll ask the user to enter something, right? So what he'll do is that he will enter something called as a done. So when it is done, so I'm just tracking it. That is, the infinite loop has been terminated or abruptly terminated using a break statement. Once it happens, only the while loop will be terminated. Only the while loop will be get terminated, and the execution control will be transferred to the instruction immediately to the while loop, immediately after the while loop. So what it will do is that it will print something called as the done. It will print something called as the done on the terminal. That is what the things. So here look at this one. The break statement ends the current loop and jumps to the statement immediately following the loop. It is like a loop test that can happen anywhere in the body of the loop. What you are doing is that once the break appears, your execution control will directly transfer to what you call as the immediately after the while code blocks. So the loop condition is true, which is always true. So the loops runs repeatedly until it hits the break statement. Each time true, it prompts the user with an angle bracket. If the user types done, the break statement exits the loop, right? If the user types done, so the, the program will turn, not the program, the only the while loop will terminate, and the next subsequent instruction will be get executed. Otherwise, the program echoes whatever the user types and goes back to the top of the program, right? If the user never types done, the word code as done, your while loop executes infinitely. Even though you have used the break statement, there is no end to the number of iterations. There is no end to the number of iterations. As long as you type the word code as done, it is going to enter into an infinite loop. That is what. So the loop condition is true. This is what we have seen it, right? Sometimes you can skip some of the instructions, or you can skip some of the executable instructions, and you can proceed with the other instructions. In that case, what you can do is that you can use another uh, keyword called as the continue, which will skip the remaining instructions and continue with the next iterations, right? What happened with the break statement is that once the break statement occurs, or once the break statement has appeared in the while loop, it will skip all the instructions. Along with that, it will, the execution control will come out of the while loop itself. But it is not something like with the continuous statement, right? So unlike your C, C++, and Java, what you have seen it, so continue appears to be very similar here, right? Sometimes we are in an iteration of a loop and want to finish the current iteration and immediately jump to the next instruction iteration. In that case, you can use the continue statement to skip to the next iteration without finishing the body of the loop for the current iteration. But the continue statement will use that it will skip only the current iteration, right? It will skip only the current iteration, and it will proceed to the next iteration, right? In that case, you can use the continuous statement to skip the next iteration, sorry, next iteration without finishing the body of the loop for the current iteration. Here is an example of a loop that copies its input and the user types done, but treats lines that starts with the hash character as line not to be printed. Let us look at this one. Here is one code, simple code snippet stating how the continuous statement actually works, right? The continuous statement ends the current iteration and jumps to the top of the loop and start the next iteration, right? So while true, this itself indicates that it is going to enter into an infinite loop. So line is equal to input, that is we are accepting the input from the user, right? If the line or if the first character in the input is equal to hash, right? So you continue with the next iteration. You continue with the next iteration. That is, you skip this current iteration and go to the next iteration. Otherwise, if the line what you have entered or if the input is equal to done, you break this infinite loop and jump out of the while loop, right? So what is that? Line is equal to input. So one in this here is an output, right? Hello there. So what the it is neither it, in this case the first character is not equal to hash, right? The first character is not equal to hash, so the continuous statement will not have no use, and the line is not equal to done. So what you are doing is that the break is not also, it's not going to make use of this here. And then what you're doing is that you're printing the line. What is the right line? It is the hello there. It will go to the next rotation where we are entering something called as a don't print this, right? Hash don't print this. And in the line of zero indicate the first character. The first character is hash, right? It's an hash, right? So it will skip this current instruction or the current iteration, and it will go to the next iteration, right? So without printing the line or whatever the input you have given it, without printing that, it will go to the next iteration, right? Where again it will ask for the user to enter something. What he will do is that he will enter something called as a print this. So the first character is not equal to zero. Sorry, this is not equal to hash, and now the line is what you have entered is equal to done. So what it will do is that it will print the whole line. So that is called as a print this, and it will again go to the next iteration where the true, right? You're inputting something called as a something called as done, something called as done. So when it is done, right? So this line is equal to done. So what you'll do is that you're just breaking the entire while loop. You're just breaking the entire while loop. You just look at the difference between the continue and the break statement here. Continue skips only the current iteration and it will go to the next iteration without hampering the execution of the other instructions, right? Whereas in case of the break statement, it will break the entire loop. Either it may be a while loop, do while loop, or for loop, whatever it may be. It will break the entire loop, and it will the execution control will be transferred to the instruction immediately followed by the loops. That is exactly what you have it. So look at this one. While the continuous statement sends the current iteration and jumps to the what you use that uh, jumps to the statement, ends the current iteration and jumps to the top of the loop and start the next iteration, right? So finishing an iteration without continue, right? All the lines were printed except the one that starts with a hash sign, because when the continue executed, it ends the current iteration and jumps back to the while statement to start the next iteration, thus skipping the print statement. So while loops are called indefinite loops because the keeps going until a logical condition becomes false, right? Unless otherwise the condition becomes false, your a while loop enters into an infinite loop. And these infinite loops are also called as the indefinite loops. The loops we have seen so far are pretty easy to examine to see if they will terminate or if they will be infinite loop. Sometimes it is a little harder to be sure if a loop will terminate, right? We don't know whether mm, to understand whether the loop will terminate into an infinite loop or not. We something called as There is something called as the definite loops, right? Sometimes we want to loop through a set of things such as a list of words, the lines in a file, or a list of numbers. There are occasions where you're supposed to uh, loop through a set of things, something like a list of words or something like this, or into an array or into a list or whatever it may be. When you have a list of things to loop through, we can construct a definite loop using the for statement, right? We are using a for statement so that we can uh, loop it through the things definitely or finitely. We call the while statement an indefinite loop because it simply loops until some condition becomes false, right? As long as the condition is true, the while loop or the encoding instructions will be executed infinitely. But as far as the for loop is considered, it is called as a definite loop because when the condition becomes like when the loop or when the array exhausts, the for loop will terminate. The for loop is looping through a known set of items, so it runs through as many iterations as there are items in the list or in the set. As the for loop will iterate, so as long as the instruction or as long as there are items in the set or in the list or in the array, whatever it may, right? So once the list or the array exhausts the items, then the for loop will terminate. We say that definite loops iterate through the members of a set, right? It's going to iterate through members of a set. So look at this one, right? It's a definite loop with the strings. So here a list called as the friends, which contains three items in it: Joseph, Glenn, and Sally. So what the for loop will do is that it will loop through friends. It will loop through friends as long as there are items in the list. As long as the items in the list, right? In the first iteration, it will print something called as a Happy New Year friend. Friend is nothing but the Joseph. And the second loop, the Glenn, that is Happy New Year Glenn. And the third loop, it will print something called as Happy New Year Sally. And in the fourth loop, so there are no more items here. There is no more items because we had only three items here, right? Joseph, Glenn, and the Sally. That's fine. The for loop will terminate or it will exhaust the items. It has exhausted the items, then it will come out of the for loop and it will print something called as a done. It will print something called as the done. This is how your definite loop works. So here we have a list called as the friends, so which contains only three items in it. So for loop will loop it through all the three items, that is a Joseph, Glenn, and the Sally. Once all the items exhaust, so for loop will automatically terminate, and it will come out of the for loop, and it will print something called as the done. Unlike our C and C++, where you are using increment, condition checking, and all the things. So here is something called as the for. Then we are reading each item from the list or a set, and that item will be assigned to the friend or whatever the variable you have it, and the same variable will be used in your the next instructions, not only here, anywhere, right? So this is how you can use the definite loop. So this is called as a definite loop because once the for loop exhausts the number of items in the list, so it will terminate it automatically, or it will come out of the for loop automatically. So that is what you call it as definite loop is the thing. In Python terms, the variable friends is a list of three strings. The for loop goes through the list and executes the body once for each of the three strings in the list, resulting in this output. That is, in the first iteration it will print happy new year Joseph, second iteration happy new year Glenn, third iteration happy new year Sally, and so there is no fourth iteration here. Directly it will print the value code as a done. Looking at the for loop, like for and in are reserved Python keywords. Friend is the iteration variable for the for loop, right? In this case, for and in are the keywords, right? Reserved words or the keywords. The variable friend changes for each iteration of the loop and controls when the for loop completes, right? The variable, right? The variable actually holds each items for each iteration. It holds one variable from the friends list. The iteration variable steps successfully through the three strings stored in the friends variable. The iteration variable steps successfully through the three strings stored in the friends variable. All right. A simple definite loop. What you have is that here is a list. Instead of creating a separate list here, what we have done is that we have inserted as a part of the for loop itself for I. That is, it is going to read each item in the list 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and for each iteration, it is reading one item from the list and it is printing it, right? So once the value, once you exhaust all the five items, so it will print something called as the blast stuff. In the first iteration it will print a file called as 5, second iteration 4, third iteration 3, fourth iteration 2, fifth iteration 1, and there is no more items here, so it will print something called as a blast stuff and it will terminate it, right? So look at those things here. So simple definite loop for I in. So that's exactly, definite loops have explicit iteration variables that change each time through a loop. These iteration variables move through the sequence of sets. That is, no, if there is no items here, right? So done, move ahead to the next iteration or the next item in the list. So if there is no, there are more items in the list, so read the next item and print it. And this will be done as long as there are items in the list. Once it is once there are no more items in the list, what it will do is that it will print the value code as the blast off on the terminal, right? This is your output, looks something like this. That is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and finally it is the blast off. So iteration variable iterates through the sequence, that is the order set. It is called as I is called as the iteration variable, and this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is called as a set. Block of the body code is executed once for each value in the sequence. Block or also code block, we also this one a single instruction or a group of instruction, we call it as the code blocks, or simply we call it as the body of the program or the body of the loop, or also we call it as the block of the loop, right? The block or body of the code is executed once for each value in the sequence. The iteration variable moves through all of the variable values in the sequence. That is iteration variable. It's starting from the first item, right, or the first element. It will move through all the 5 items, maybe like how many items you have it. So it will um, iterate through all the items. Maybe you have 5 items, 10 items, whatever it may be. It will move through all the items in the list. That is called as the iteration variable. So quite often we have a list of items of lines in a file, effectively a finite set of things, right? In a file we have the number of lines, and these number of lines we generally call it as finite set of things. We can write a loop to run the loop once for each of the items in a set using the Python for construct, right? We can use the for construct or the for loop to run it through a file. These loops are called as the finite loops because they execute an exact number of times. They will be executed for a finite number of times. They'll be executed for a certain number of times. That's why they are called as the definite loops. We say that definite loops iterate to the members of a set, right? Using the iteration variable, it will move through or iterate through the members of the set. Here is one example of the things. The definite set, that is counts the number of items in a list. That is count equal to 0, initialize the value called as the count equal to 0. So for it's an iteration variable in these items, right? How many items you have, you're supposed to count it. That is we have totally 6 items, right? For each iteration we have to count one item and increment the value called as the count by 1. That is for the first iteration, right? Before starting the first iteration, count will be equal to 0. Count will be equal to so so for iteration variable, and I have for each before starting the for loop, the count value was 0. So once it enters into the first for loop, uh, it will read the first item or the first element. Then there is one element, right? That's why the value of the count will be incremented by 1. That is count is equal to count plus 1. So in the second iteration it will read the second element, that is 41. Then the count is incremented by one more time. Like this it will iterate 6 times. It will iterate 6 times. At the seventh iteration there are no more elements, right? There are no more elements. That's why uh, the for loop terminate or for loop will end. Then it will print the value called as the count, right? So here the value of the count is equal to 6, right? So we set the value count to 0 before the loop starts. Then we write a for loop to run through the list of numbers. Our iteration variable is named iteration variable, and while we cannot use iteration variable in the loop, it does control the loop and cause the loop body to be executed once for each of the values in the list. In the body of the loop we add 1 to the current value of count for each of the values in the list. So summing the loops, that is to count, to add the values, the the sum of the all the elements in the list. So the final sum is equal to 0. So for each iteration I'm adding each element. That is initially final sum is equal to 0. So that is 0. First iteration element 3 will be done. 3 plus the iteration, sorry, the final sum is 0 initially, plus the iteration value 3. 3 plus 0, 3, that will be updated into final sum. In the second iteration variable will be having 41. That will be added to the final sum, which was 3. 3 plus 41, so 44, right? That will be stored back into final sum. And in this third iteration 12 will be get added to the final sum, and like this after 6 iteration the final sum contains the sum of all these 6 elements. It contains the sum of all these 6 elements, and that is going to be printed on the terminal, right? So that is sum of the final sum is final sum. In this loop we do use the iteration variable, Instead of simply adding 1 to the count as in the previous loop, we add the actual number itself to the running total during each iteration. In the previous iteration, what you have done is that you have counted the total number of elements, but here we have summed up all the elements itself instead of them, right? So before the loop starts, total is zero because we haven't yet seen any values, right? We have not seen any value. That's why the final sum was initialized to 0. And as the loop executes, total accumulates the sum of the elements. That is a variable used this way is sometimes called as an accumulator, right? So if I can loop it through a list here. So this is one more example of the things, right? Before. So the first, it is going to print the value called as a before. For thing is nothing but it here is an iteration variable, right? It's an iteration variable. It will iterate through all these elements of the list, right? 9, 41, 12, 3, 74, and 15. So what I am doing is that in the first iteration, the iteration variable will have 9 and it will be get printed. In the second iteration, 41 will be there in the iteration variable. And like this for sixth iteration, it will print 9, 41, 12, 3, 74, and 15 on the terminal. And after sixth iteration, it will print the value part as a after, right? So that is what so you're just going through the list. So you're not doing anything. You're just reading the contents of the list or contents of the set, and you're just printing the value whatever you have in the set. So you can count the number of iterations. So look at this one. You can count the total number of iterations here, right? So joke is that the number of iterations what we have it. So before, that is, joke was initially 0, that is we have not have done any iterations at all, right? So after first iteration, so joke becomes 1 and you are printing 1 joke plus thing. Thing is nothing but 9. That is 1. The first iteration we are printing 9. In the second iteration, joke becomes 2. So the iteration value or the element is 41. That is 2 and 41. And like this, for sixth iteration, it will print the value of, that is after sixth iteration, it is 6 and 15. And once it is done, yes, yes, hello, hello, Deeps. You have any queries? Okay. So after sixth iteration, what you have is it will print 6, right? After sixth iteration, it is just to count the number of iterations that you have passed it to, right? So here totally we have 6 iteration. That's why at the end of all the iterations, we have Zork is equal to 6. To count how many times we execute a loop, we introduce a counter variable that starts at 0 and we add 1 to it each time through the loop, right? For each iteration, we are incrementing the value of a counter called as a door, and at the end of all the iterations, we are printing the value of that counter variable, which is nothing but the 6 in this case. Here, the same thing we are doing it here, right? What you're doing is that just for each iteration, you're printing the value, right? You're printing the value. What is the item you have read and what was the sum of the previous elements? In the first element or in the first iteration, it was 9. 9 plus the value, that is 0. So 9 will be get printed. And what is the item that you have read? That is 9. In the second iteration, the iteration variable have 41 and the Zook has 9. 9 plus 41, that is 50. 50 and whatever the iteration current element you have, that is 50 and 41, right? And the third iteration, it becomes 62 and the current element is 12. And in the fourth iteration, it is 65 and 3 and so on. And after six iteration, we have the sum of all the elements. We have sum of all the elements. It is just only to demonstrate After it, each iteration, what is the sum of the elements? What is the sum of the elements? That is york is equal to 0 initially. So at the first iteration, after the first iteration, it becomes 9. After second iteration, it becomes 50, and so on. After sixth iteration, we have sum of the all the elements in the set. To add up a value, we encounter in a loop, we introduce a sum variable that starts at 0, and we add the value to the sum each time through the loop. And here is something called as the sum to finding the sum of the averages, or the sum of finding the average in a loop. What do you do is that average is nothing but finding the, we have to find the sum of the all the elements plus the total number of elements what you have it, the sum of the elements and the total number of elements what you have it. Look at this one, we have something called as a count, which is just to calculate the number of elements in the list, and sum is nothing but the number of elements, sorry, sum of the all the elements in the list, that is print before count and the sum, right? Print before and the sum. Then initially the count and sum are equal to 0, right? They are printed here. And for the first, after first iteration, value is 9 and the count value is 1. And what you're doing is that sum is equal to sum plus value, right? Initially sum is 0 plus value is nothing but 9. 9 plus 0, 9. Sum becomes 9, right? The count is equal to 1, sum is 9, and value is also 9. It goes to the second iteration, value becomes 41, count becomes 2, and sum is equal to the previous sum plus the value, that is the iteration value variable, 41 plus 9, which is nothing but 50. Count is 2 and 50 and 41. Like this, it will print all the values with their sum and the number of iterations. So it is a iteration is nothing but the, we are counting the number of elements in the list. So after all these things, what I am doing is that I am finding the average. So what is that average after the count? Count is nothing but the number of elements in the list, and the sum is nothing but 154 and sum, and finally it is, what is that, sum divided by count. Sum divided by count, which is nothing but 154 by 2. What is that, sum is this is 6, which is nothing but 25.66, and the average just combines the counting and sum patterns and divides when the loop is done, right? So okay, that is for the today's class. uh, we'll end it here.